Which classic monster story is better, Dracula or Frankenstein? I'm specifically talking about the Wordsworth classics, so these editions. Also, ignore the fact I'm wearing gloves, it's freezing. I'm going to start with Dracula. If you haven't read Dracula, the story is about an old guy. How do I explain what Dracula is about? It's about a vampire called Dracula. However, the book does not have his point of view at all. It's a point of view of a bunch of people, and the whole story is just journal entries. So there's one from two women, I've forgotten their names. A guy called Jonathan, and then I think there's Van Helsing's point of view as well. But yeah, that was a very bad summary. I think if you follow me on Goodreads, you kind of get why I have a bad summary of Dracula. So my rating for Dracula is actually 3 out of 5 stars, which is in the middle. So, as I said, Dracula has multiple point of views, but it was not executed in a way that worked in the book's favour. For example, I've read other books that are multiple point of view. For example, Wonder worked really well. Also, for journal entries didn't really work out in the book's favour either. And I like mixed media elements in books. I like multiple point of views. But for Dracula, it didn't really work out. An example of a book that, in my opinion, did journal entries really, really well is Perplexed with Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. Also, I did not like the fact that Dracula was barely in the book, since he is the namesake. Or from what my memory of the book is. He was barely in it. I was expecting it to be, you know, a lot more. But then I think it's because I've grown up knowing who Dracula is. Not necessarily knowing his story, but I've known that he is a vampire. And I've seen him in a bunch of films like Van Helsing, Scooby-Doo, you know, where he's, you know, a badass vampire. Buffy, for example, but that was this here. Also, as I was reading the book, I got really confused a lot. Like, the book was just confusing to, like, go along with and follow. And there were multiple times where I would just zone out, and then I'll go back into the book. Like, so I'll be reading it, and then I'll zone out, forget what I was reading, and then I have to go back. I had to do that like a bunch of times. However, that could be my fault, because that does happen a lot. Also, the writing style was just not for me. Moving on to Frankenstein. I actually have a lot less thoughts about this one, even though my rating is higher. So for Frankenstein, I rated it 5 stars. And it's also on my favourite book list, so you could probably guess which one I think is better, Dracula or Frankenstein. So, the book had 2 point of views. One was Dr. Frankenstein and one was the monster. And unlike Dracula, where, hold on, let me find the example. It says like chapter 5 and then a letter. So this was like letters and journals. And then it would say, so it said like letter from Mina to whoever. This one, it did not tell you whether it was in Dr. Frankenstein or Frankenstein. However, if you were reading it, when you read it, it's actually really, really obvious. For starters, the first half of the book is Dr. Frankenstein, and then the second half is mainly the monster's point of view. And the way they're written is kind of different. Like, the monster is written more as a child than grown adult, you know. Even though I did get confused, but then that's purely because I turned the page, ignored the fact that it said, hold on, it actually might have said Frankenstein. No, it didn't. But like, I kind of got confused when it went into Frankenstein's point of view because it didn't label it. But then that's also my fault because if it says chapter, I would just turn a page and go straight to the words and skip like chapter 2, you know. I'll just skip for chapter headings and go straight to the actual story. But then that's purely my own fault. And I was only confused for 2 seconds because I clicked that it was for Monster. I think if I didn't click that it was Monster's point of view, I would have got confused. Also, Mary Shelley's writing style I just love from this one book. Like, I don't know what it is about her writing style, but I think it's really, really beautiful. And I don't know how to explain it other than just read the book. Also, compared to Dracula, I found Frankenstein much, much, much easier to read because the dialect and the wording, even though they're both classics, I found the dialect in this easier to read, but then it also could be how these two were edited. And now I want to read Mary Shelley's other works. So now I will put a table with the tallying. So at the top there's Frankenstein and Dracula, and then there's writing style, characters, easy to read, better point of views, emotional attachment to the characters. So I gave Frankenstein a point for the writing style. I gave them both, so Frankenstein and Dracula, points for characters because I like the characters in both. However, I preferred the characters in Frankenstein. Easier to read, gave a point to Frankenstein. Better point of views, Frankenstein. Even though there was more point of views in Dracula, because I found them for point of views easier to distinguish in Frankenstein, I gave a point to Frankenstein. Emotional attachments to characters, I gave a point to Frankenstein. Even though I have an emotional attachment to Van Helsing, it's not this version, it's Hugh Jackman's version because I love the film Van Helsing. However, I now have an emotional attachment to the monster. So, the total winning points are Frankenstein has 5 and Dracula has 1, which means that, in my personal opinion, not Dracula, in my personal opinion, Frankenstein is the better monster classic.